Whether you like him or you hate him, it's undeniable that Kanye West is one of the most influential producers in hip-hop. He's been responsible for changing the soundscape of music not once but multiple times. But how did he do this? What does Kanye do with his beats that makes him so different? Today we're going to uncover this by analyzing his beats and breaking down 3 powerful ideas that he uses in his production that you can use to improve your own beats. By the way, if you enjoy these videos, think about hitting like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments which producer you want me to do next. So let's start off with number 1. If you watch YouTube beatmaking videos, they'll all tell you that using distorted, super crunchy 808s will make your beats hit hard. The distorted 808 has become the holy grail of all modern beatmaking for whatever reason. But Kanye's beats show an entirely different approach that so many producers overlook. For example, let's take a look at the production behind Numbers on the Board by Pusha T.
Your plane's missing a shift. The common theme, see they both got wings.
This beat is just unique. You've probably never heard a beat like this before or since, and there are a few things that make it so different. First off, if this beat had a typical 808, the same type of bass that everyone uses, would this beat sound as unique? Not quite the same beat here. And this is one thing that Kanye's beats do differently, which is the use of distortion on sounds and textures that no one else really thinks about as a way to make his beats stand out. So if we take a look at the bass pattern in this beat, we see that it's a very straightforward pattern here. Here I'm using Wave Candy, a tool that lets you see all the notes inside of a sample or a song. In case you want to learn how to use this thing, the link is in the corner. So as you can see, the bass pattern isn't special. It's playing the exact same note over and over again. It's the bass sound itself and what's done to it that stands out. We have a bass in this beat that has an extreme amount of distortion on it, but it's not an 808. As obvious as that sounds, this is an idea that so few producers explore. So often 808s are the only kind of bass that beatmakers think to use distortion on, but applying the same type of approach to other types of basses can get you just far more unique results. So here's how you can use this in your beat. Step 1 is to start off by finding a different kind of bass. For example, I'll use this random sample that I have sitting on my computer here.
That people can't conceive, that they can see what they believe.
The sample's been on my computer forever. I don't think I've actually even used it before. Let's take a look here. Wow, that's probably older than half my audience. So I'm going to use this sample for the first time in 12 years. And I'm going to use it similarly to how the bass was used in Numbers on the Board. I'll start by making a short monotone repetitive pattern. Then I'll isolate the low end and distort it to smithereens. Now with this distorted sampled bass, we just have a unique starting point for our beat that we can build upon. That's different than the typical distorted 808 that everyone else uses. So when thinking about how to get your beats to sound unique, rethink about how you use your effects. See what outcomes you can get by using distortion, for example, on sounds that you might not have ever thought of. But there's one more idea in Numbers on the Board that makes it sound so good. It's something that shows up in a lot of Kanye's other beats too. So another example is God Breathed. Here we have a minimal beat, and we have this texture in this beat that has an extreme amount of distortion on it. But let's think about what this sound is doing in the beat. When you make beats, you might use sounds like these, percussion sounds that you use as secondary layers. When most producers make beats, they'll grab side sticks and rims and claps, and they'll use a number of smaller percussive elements to fill up space in their beat in almost a passive way. But the way Kanye approaches percussive elements is just very different. He uses this very maximal approach where he'll distort sounds that would typically be just small details in his beat. And he takes a type of sound that would typically be quiet, secondary, and typical to being upfront, abrasive, and unique. And this approach works if you want to use normal percussive sounds or more unique vocal textures like he likes to do. So here I have this beat as an example. Now, instead of filling up space by using a lot of smaller percussive sounds, I'm going to grab this percussion sound instead. Then I'm going to distort it to make it far more maximal and upfront in the beat. And there's another small little idea that I want to point out here. Part of what makes this sound stand out as much as it does is the way that it's programmed. Often when you add sounds and samples into your beat, you typically look for sounds that have a tail. That way the sound feels more natural, since this is how sounds exist in nature. But as you can hear with how Kanye approaches this technique, he often does the opposite. He'll create these hard cutoffs with his samples, so there is no natural tail. Let's take a listen to this beat again here. What this technique does is it takes the sound and helps it feel very unnatural, but it's also what helps the sound stand out far more. So this is an idea that you can also use to make your samples sound more unique. To do this, simply just go into the ADSR settings in your sample and create this shape here. Now instead of your sound having a tail when you play a note, it'll stop immediately when the note ends. Next up, let's take a look at another beat produced by Kanye, You Don't Know My Name by Alicia Keys. You might not pick up on this on the first listen, but this beat actually uses some pretty sophisticated sampling techniques. So the way many producers start sampling is to do something like this, where you might find a segment from a song that you like and create a simple loop. Now, I'm not saying looping is bad by any means, I loop often, but using more advanced techniques can help you unlock more ideas with your samples. For example, right now we have a 2-bar loop for this beat. So one thing that Kanye did with his sample was that he used a loop extending technique. He created an additional chop partway through this loop. He then used this new chop multiple times for the first bar, and then for the second bar, he just let the full loop play. What this does is it takes this 2-bar loop and it turns it into a 4-bar loop, which will help the beat not sound as repetitive. But there's an even smarter technique that he does with his beat. There's one more difference in his version of the beat here. And this is something that can be so helpful when you make beats using samples. Right now, it's obvious where the chops are in this beat when you take a listen. They happen at pretty standard typical times. For example, at the beginning of each beat. Using chop placement like this isn't bad by any means, but a way you can make your beat sound a little bit more sophisticated is by hiding the seams. That's exactly what Kanye did with his version of the beat. So instead of having our last chop end at the end of the bar and repeating this loop again, what Kanye did instead is he extended this last chop to continue playing into the next bar. Then he created a new chop. This chop is similar to this one, but the difference is that it plays a little bit later. It plays one less note at the beginning, as you can see here. So this helps move the seam so it's no longer at the beginning of the bar. Instead, it happens just a tiny bit later, at a point that's not as standard or typical and harder to hear. This is just a smart way to help make your loops sound less manufactured when you sample. This is a technique that you can use no matter what style of sample or what style of beat you're making. For example, I have this sample here that's just a bunch of bells. Instead of creating a straightforward loop like this, I can choose to chop and create seams that are at non-obvious points. And this can just be a better way to start your beat. But a lot of what I just showed you here requires you to know how to sample, which I know is a big struggle for many producers. So if this sounds like you, I'll recommend 2 videos. Check out the top one if you have absolutely no idea how to sample. In it, I show you how to get started with sampling. But if you do know how to sample, but your sample beats just don't sound that good, check out the second one. I show you some of the things that you might be missing from your sampling game. Thank you again for watching. Hit like and subscribe before you go, and I hope you have a good day.